Let's call the school board meeting to order. George, could you take roll, please?
Colonel Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Here.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here.
All present.
Excellent. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. District goals. Every meeting we state our district goals. We have 3 goals. Student achievement's our number 1 goal, and everything we do is focused on student achievement. Our second goal is financial prudence, and that's where we try to squeeze every drop of value out of every taxpayer dollar that we get so that we can maximize student achievement with the resources that we have. And sometimes when our resources fall short, our third goal comes into play, and that is community engagement. That's when we rely on the community to come in and help us. They help us on the, officially on the facilities committee, on the finance committee. They sit in on some of the policy committees. There's a tech committee. There's all kinds of committees where we have people come in, not to mention just volunteers for a lot of other different reasons. The PTA, a lot of different things where the people come in and help us. So that's what we do, and everything here, that's what it's based on. That brings us to recognition. We have no recognition. That brings us to item 6, which is the Superintendents Report to the community. Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. Naso. What I want to do tonight for our report to the community is actually break a discussion up on our financial outlook into 2 pieces. So the first piece we're going to do during the report to the community, and the second piece George and I will talk about through the timely information. So as you talked about, one of our goals is community engagement, and we do that through a variety of ways. And since the last levy that we had on the ballot, whether it be through informal means, through email communication, or the 8 focus groups that we had, we got a lot of feedback from our community, and we took that feedback and put it into action. So one of the pieces of feedback that we got a lot as a theme from our focus groups and our engagement with the community is this question: with a decline in enrollment, shouldn't our funding also decline? What we need to remember is that we have not had new funding as a school district since 2007. And since 2007, we've not only had not had new funding, but we've been reduced in funding by roughly $9 million with the elimination of taxes at the state and local level. So during that time, yes, our enrollment has declined. But at the same time, costs go up. And there's a lot of examples we can give, but some examples that I've shared here is since 2011 or 2007, inflation rates have risen 21%. Costs of goods, services, utilities have also gone up. In 2007, maybe technology was a want. It was a nice to have. In 2018, it's a need. It's an integral part of what we do for our kids. And our board has allocated $500,000 a year to provide technology and keep it up to date and to keep the resources so our kids are competitive. That's a real cost that we have to incur on an annual basis to make sure we're providing the education that our students deserve and our community expects. The other thing is the state makes a lot of laws. And some of those laws come mandates that are unfunded. One of those, and I recently wrote about it in an article to the Post, is about College Credit Plus. Now, College Credit Plus is a great program. It provides kids the opportunity to take college-level courses and earn college credit on our campus at the high school or in a local campus such as Tri-C. And some of our students are earning enough credits that they're a sophomore status. That's saving our community and our parents thousands of dollars in college tuition. But somebody has to pay for that. And it's the school district that pays for that. We pay on a per credit hour basis. We pay for the textbooks. That's not something that Strongsville chooses to do because it's right by kids. It's something the state said you are going to do. And with the new CCP program, it's exponentially increased the number of students that are participating, which has increased our costs. And so at that same time, as I said, our local and state funding has been reduced and our revenue has been remained relatively flat. Although we see new developments, right? We see that sign for Home Goods going in across from the mall. We see new businesses coming up. Yes, that generates some new revenue for the district, but it's not what the perception of some may have that is going to solve our financial problems. George, I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so as Mr. Riva stated, whenever there's new construction or new development, the increased cost or the increased value of that area we would see a slight increase in tax dollars for the addition. But overall, about annually we see an increase about 100 to 200,000 on new construction. And as Strongsville is considered almost developed out, there's few areas left for development where we are capping out, and we're not going to see much more growth in our tax revenue other than what we're seeing now. There's a little increase, but 200,000 of close to 60 million in tax collections, it's not a huge percentage.
And the other thing that I'd like to mention is that discussion about enrollment tied to funding. So I want to be clear that it's not a one-to-one correspondence between how many students do we have in our district and does that require less funding because it requires less staff. As we've shared throughout the last campaign, our enrollments declined by about 22%. We've declined our staff over roughly 199 positions by about 20%. So our staff is commensurate with our enrollment. But I just wanted to share an example that our lowest enrollment currently as a district is in the elementary school. It's in the mid-300s. In the middle school, you're in the 400s. And in the high school, you're a mix of 4s and 500s. So at the high school, yes, there is a quick reaction to that. Less kids in the high school, less courses offered, less staffing needs. At the middle school, we run a team structure. And at the elementary school, we have neighborhood schools, which means that you can't look at all of the first graders we have in the district, and if 20 of them leave, we need one less teacher. As an example, at Chapman Elementary School, we have 60 kids in 5th grade. That means to truly see a reduction in costs, a reduction in personnel, we would need 29 5th graders at Chapman to leave the district, and then we would finally see a savings because we would be able to reduce the staff. And if you look at that trend of 20 plus kids, you can use that, we've done the math on every grade level, but you can use that as an estimate. That we would need roughly 20 or more kids in every grade level in every building to go to school in another location to truly see a savings, because we have class caps, we need to educate students, and whether I have 50 students in 2nd grade or 28 students in 2nd grade, I still need 2 teachers if we're going to continue with the class caps that we have.
Can I continue on that for a
Please.
moment? You know, when you talk about a decrease in funding, or excuse me, a decrease in enrollment driving reduced costs, there's 2 types of costs. I'm a CPA, a CFO by trade, and there's 2 types of costs. You have variable costs and you have fixed costs. The district has a high level of fixed costs because you have to maintain buildings. You need principals. You need, a principal for every building. You need a cafeteria staff for every building. There's certain things that you have regardless of what the enrollment is in that building. The things that we've done is on the variable side is we did that. When the enrollment went down, and we've kind of steadied off a good part of our enrollment, there was a large decrease. And when that happened, we took out 6 buildings. We had excess capacity. We looked around and we said, okay, we have too many elementary schools. And painfully, we closed some. We combined the middle schools. We took out buildings. That's what we did to offset the impact of the reduced enrollment to maximize, to save as much savings as we could get. We also reduced our staff by the same percentage as it went down. So when they say that your enrollment went down, they're looking back 4, 5, 7 years. We've already made those changes. We've already taken that out. The enrollment is now kind of steadied off. It goes down a little bit, 25, but not like the dramatic drops where we were seeing 200, 300 drops in a year. So we've already made those adjustments for the decline in enrollment. And and the fixed costs are still here. You have an administration. You have to have buses. You have to have snow plows. You have to have, maintenance equipment. You have, all those things are fixed costs to the district regardless of what the enrollment is. So, there's step changes. But we've really taken a lot of the variable stuff out that we could.
So the other feedback that we received was, what has the district done? We've talked about the reducing staff, changing our insurance plans, looking at right-sizing the district, but what else has the district done? And have we completed a comprehensive review of all of our operations to increase efficiencies and reduce costs? So what we have done is we've done that comprehensive review. We've reviewed every single aspect of our district operations, and what it's led to is a comprehensive cost reduction plan. So right now on a cost reduction plan, we have roughly 145 possible items that the district can take action on to reduce costs, and we've broken that plan down into 3 phases. So phase one is cost reductions that are going to occur regardless of a future levy. And I'll share more about that in a minute. Phase two would be, should the board approve a levy to go on the May 2019 ballot, of those 145 items, some of those are considered phase two items, which would be cost reductions that would be put into place if a May 2019 levy would fail. And then the third phase, phase three, is cost reductions that would occur beyond that May 2019 levy failure if the November 19 and/or May 2020 levy failed. Then there's another level in that 145 possible reductions that would be implemented at that time. And those are all discussions that we would have with the board at a future board meeting to discuss. But what I want to talk about tonight is phase one, those cost reductions that I will be recommending happen regardless of future levy. So the goal of this was to go in to do that comprehensive review of all of our operations and look at, can we reduce expenses by at least $1 million? So we've done that, and we've been able in phase one to reduce expenditures by over $1.1 million if we enact all of those suggested reductions. Now, the reality is these reductions are painful. These are not reductions that we just look at and say, okay, we can save some money here or there. But as we talk about, they're going to negatively impact program services, resources, and personnel. We're going to go through a detailed list of what those phase one reductions are at our February board meetings, as well as phase two reductions. But just looking categorically, and we've shared some pictures with you, as we take a look at our district comprehensively, in phase one, those reductions that I'm recommending will happen regardless of a levy, we're talking about reductions in athletics. We're talking about reductions in course offerings and curriculum that are used to help support our students. Our student services resources that we're able to provide. That technology we talked about, transportation services, as well as personnel costs. So all of those costs are as a part of, or categories are a part of possible phase one reductions with the goal of reducing our overall expenditures by $1.1 million. And so we'll start talking in detail in our upcoming February meetings about what those are, and then ultimately we'll have to make decisions on which of those will be implemented. And with that, Mr. Naso, that concludes my report to the community at this time, unless there's any questions on what I've shared.
Any questions? No.
I've got a comment. When I first came on the board 6 years ago, I remember going into the computer lab, and I remember the Windows that we used in the computer lab was 3 series old. It was abominable. It was the worst. It was really, really bad. And now, to have to go through phase one in reductions, and I understand the position that we're in, it's just really sad, because we're pulling programs away from children who we're supposed to protect, who we're supposed to take care of, who are supposed to help lead in this community for a better, brighter future. And it makes me sad that we actually have to even consider this. It's a bad day for Strongsville. It's just a really bad day for Strongsville. That's my comment.
And Mr. Grosjean, just following up on that, just to be clear, the reason we have to implement these reductions with the levy failure in 2018 is that we're projected to deficit spend by $3.4 million this year.
I understand.
And just like any other organization or business or operation, you can't continue to operate that way and be successful, and our funding levels are uncertain right now. And so we need to do what we can. The goal is to protect the core of what we do with that phase one, protect the core services and resources that we provide our students. But as we'll share publicly in February, we feel that we've done a comprehensive review to see how we can get savings through a variety of areas to reach that $1.1 million threshold to try and reduce the deficit spending that we are gonna incur.
Okay, and I've seen the list, and I'm happy that the list is across the board, that there aren't any sacred cows, there's nothing in there that's not, everything's gonna feel a little bit of this hit. I mean, there's just no other way to do it, and it's the fair way to do it. And if we have to reduce our spending, which we have to, because that was the message we received loud and clear, we're gonna do that, and it's gonna hurt across the board. It's in a tiered approach based on, when we get additional funding, so there'll be incremental levels of cuts as we progress through the year or into next year, and if necessary, but we are preparing for what we have to do. So that's good. It's bad, but it's what we have to do. With that, that brings us to public comment. We do have one public comment. Andy Hartman, if you'd like to step up, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name, your address, and then try not to name names or,
My name is Andy Hartman. My address is 12300 Cooper's Run. I'm the parent of 2 instrumental music students at the high school. I wanted to tell you guys I appreciate you letting me talk, and I thank you for the past support that you've provided for music in Strongsville schools. Those kids that have participated are better students and better people because of it. My kids have benefited greatly from being in band and orchestra. Both started in 5th grade. They both still play their instruments. Ethan has branched off into symphony orchestra. Nicholas loves playing in jazz band. Both are fantastic AP and honor students, and they found a strong base of friends throughout their schooling, largely due to music. There's approximately 700 to 800 students that participate in band and orchestra, 5th grade through 12th grade. There are 7 directors that support all of those kids. 3 band directors and 2 orchestra directors at the middle school, 1 orchestra and 1 band director at the high school, and some combination of those support the elementary music programs in 5th grade. Half of those directors have been given reduction in force notices. So working through scenarios, I don't see how eliminating band and orchestra directors makes any fiscal sense whatsoever. In terms of students taught, I bet you guys don't have a better bang for your buck in the district. I can't think of any other teachers that have an average class size of 50+ students except music. And if you reduce the directors, you'll only greatly increase the ensemble size, or you're going to require ensembles to be eliminated. It's going to reduce opportunities for kids to participate and reap the benefits of music education. I don't know what cuts are actually going to happen. We'll find out in February. But I'm really concerned about the band and orchestra programs because if you eliminate any of those 7 people, you're going to significantly impact the band and orchestra programs across the district. There are hundreds of studies that detail the value of music education, the positive impact it has on other subjects, development of life skills like leadership, teamwork, confidence, and discipline, as well as a much higher overall engagement in school. I'd be happy to provide any and all of those things I can find to you guys. I realize you're in a tough spot. Without a levy, there's not a lot of money. Without a resolution to the unconstitutional school funding scheme, there's not a lot of money. A lot of the AP and honor students are also band and orchestra students. So they're going to be doubly impacted by what's probably on the way. My oldest is going to be a senior next year. My youngest is going to be a sophomore. When I think about the kids that I had in 5th grade when they started band and how they've progressed scholastically as well as socially, growing into band camp, their freshman years and where they are now, I know the growth that they've experienced would not have been possible without the strong music programs in Strongsville and the encouragement of the directors. So please, retain all 3 of these directors and continue your support of our exceptional, award-winning band and orchestra programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Naso, if I could?
Yeah.
Andy, I couldn't agree with you more. Both of my children started piano at 5 years old. And then William decided that he was going to play the violin. And so now in 7th grade, not only is he playing for orchestra, but he's also offshoot into another little smaller group. My daughter Celia, she's in 3rd grade, and we started her off at 5 years old as well. I couldn't agree with you more regarding what music does, the ability to read notes, play an instrument, and how that scholastically helps the children's mind develops. I couldn't agree with you more, sir.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. And, one thing I would say is that, when if we do get this levy going, we would look to maybe, you have such a passion for this, right? Maybe you can help us reach and work with the orchestra and the band parents and stuff to organize and help us work to get this done. Because like we talked about the $1 million in cuts, we're gonna make those cuts. We don't wanna make any additional cuts to that. We wanna get this thing done, and my daughter's in orchestra. I think we all of our children all of us who had children in this district, we've all been through those incredible programs. And we've all felt the wrath of Mr. Heyer when we walked into the room a little bit late. So we'll work to get it done, and we'll reach out to you, and maybe you can help us with this campaign and use that passion to drive it. So thank you. With that comes the approval, next on the agenda is approval of minutes. So we're approving the December 13, 2018 board meeting minutes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? George, can you take roll?
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
And Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. With that brings us to treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I have a few items for your consideration tonight. The first is the financial report for the month ending November 30th, 2018, which can be found in Exhibit A. The next two, B and C, are related to the Ohio School Boards Association dues. It's an annual membership to be a part of the Ohio School Boards Association. And C is the legal assistance funds that it provides, and then, which both could be found in Exhibit B and C. And then item D, the amended permanent appropriation measure, which can be found in Exhibit D with an explanation. And that concludes my report if there's any questions.
That brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you again, Mr. Naso. So this is the time, George and I, we're going to go to the podium in a minute, are going to share with you our analysis, our thoughts, our review of the different millage rates. So as you can see on pages 7, 8, and 9, and 10 of the agenda, we have 6 resolutions that are there under the timely information section. They are all saying the same thing in terms of a 5-year limited tax levy, operating levy. All say that it's going to be on the May 2019 ballot. The difference is the millage rate. There's one for 5.0, 5.5, 6.0, 6.5, 6.9, and 7.5. And also in the resolutions, those equate. Remember last meeting, you authorized George to certify that amount with the county. So the county has come back and said a 5.0 mill levy will generate X amount of dollars on an annual basis, so that's the difference. George and I will present. You will then have the option to discuss all the millage rates, select one millage rate. Ultimately, you have the choice to vote for one, and if you vote for one, you can leave the rest alone, and those will not be taken action on and be done. And there's a variety of other options we can talk about, but at this time, George and I are going to go to the podium and present what these different millage rates mean for the future of our district.
Okay. It'd be our goal as a board, I think, to, after your discussion, we'll have some discussion, and then we'll get consensus, and then vote on that item, and then just discard the others.
Sounds good.
So that would be the intention.
Okay.
George, I'm putting this notice here that you got.
Thank you, Mr. Ryba. As first part of this presentation, I have an update to the 5-year forecast, which you recall in September I presented the 5-year forecast, which was submitted in October, and then by law we have to submit October and then provide a May update. I did a review of where we're at halfway through the year, as of December 31st. Overall, we're pretty much on track. Revenue slightly increased a little bit. It went from 69 million to 70.5 million, and it was mostly due to the settlement that we received from the Cleveland Clinic, which is a one-time settlement. Interest is about $200,000 better, and then we received one-time Medicaid payments as well for our settlement. Expenditures were originally forecasted at 74.7 million. We're trending $800,000 better, so it brings it down to 73.9. But overall, the financial picture is still the same. We're still deficit spending. For this year, brought the deficit spend to 3.4 million. Next year, if everything stays on track, will be 5.1, 7.1, 9.6, and 11.6 deficit spend in the out years. Then, as you can see, we currently have a cash balance where we can sustain that for a period of time, but eventually we're eating into our cash reserves. And by 2021 and 2022, we have what's called a 60-day benchmark, where we like to have cash on hand to at least get us through 60 days, and that's about 12 to 13 million. So in 2021, we're right at that, and then 2022, we're below that benchmark, and then 2023, it's unsustainable. We're in a deficit. Then, as Mr. Riva said earlier, once you hit this deficit spend, it's just a matter of time before
And that target, that benchmark, represents about 3 months payroll. So it's not.
2 months.
2 months? So it's 2 months payroll? Okay.
Right.
So it's a pretty tight number,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you know you're going to make, you know you're going to have payroll, you know you're going to pay it, you know it's going to go. That's why
Right.
we set that target. That's why we're trying it to get below it.
Right. And the reason for that benchmark too is, the primary source of our revenues is property taxes. And property taxes are collected, we receive revenue essentially 4 times a year. January, February, we get 2 big chunks, and then March, we get a smaller chunk. Then we have to have that last through June. And then once, in June, we're gonna hit a low cash balance. And then same thing, in August, September, we're gonna receive property taxes again as they're collected, and then we have to have that last through December. So once we dip below that point, December and June become low cash balance months, and if we're at this point of a $4.1 million cash balance, we might run out. It will create a cash flow issue where in December we might have to borrow what's called tax anticipation notes to make payroll, and then once that January tax revenue comes in, you pay off that tax anticipation note with interest.
And back in 2011, we used to do that on a regular basis, which
Correct.
was ridiculous. And that's also, the timing that you mentioned, it's been implied that our cash balance is bigger than it is. Some people made that statement, one for certain, several actually. And they look at it at payday. The day we get paid, they look at the cash balance. It's kind of like when the day your check gets deposited in the bank, you think you're rich, and then all of a sudden you write all the checks to pay all your bills, you find out, whoa, you know, this is all I have left. And that's essentially how our pay is as well. We get paid 4 times a year.
Right. So at the last board meeting, you had authorized me to certify 6 millage amounts. On the next few slides, we're going to go over what the certifications are, the monthly impact, the revenue it generates, and when the first time we're going to hit a negative cash balance, and the month we're going to hit it. So the first 2 options were a 5 mil levy and a 5.5 mil levy. And the tax revenue collected here, that's listed on the chart. It's listed at our current collection rate, which is about 97%. It's where we've been historically. The amount that you'll find in the exhibit, just for everyone for clarity purposes, it's at 100%. The county certifies at 100%, but we're actually going to collect this somewhere around the 97%. So that's what I have listed on the charts. A 5 mil levy will generate about $7.9 million per year. It'll be about $1,458 per month for the average $100,000 valuation. And the first time we'll see a negative cash balance would be in December of 2025, which is fiscal year 26, of $4.8 million. For 5.5 mils, it'll generate $8.7 million a year. It'll be roughly about $16 per month per $100,000 evaluation. And we'll see a negative cash balance at that same time of December 2025, but a significantly smaller amount, 4.8 million versus $56,000.
Excuse me, George.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, and I didn't get it the last time,
Mhm.
the valuation isn't the list price of your house. It's like, what, 35% of what the, approximately of what the value of your house is?
Right, so you're taxed on 35% of the value that the county has certified your house is worth, the
So
county
if you have a
valuation.
$300,000 house, for example, you're taxed on about 100,000 worth of value? Is
You're
that correct?
taxed about, 35%.
So it would be an extra $14.38 a month or 16 per month,
Right.
depending what your 35% of your house value is.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so just to clarify, if your house is valued 200,000, if that's what the county has it valued at 200,000, the effective millage rate will be multiplied by 35% of the valuation of your house. So you're taxed on 35% of your value.
George, just so we don't muddy it, that 100K valuation is before the 35%.
No, this is what
It's already been taken into account. This
it's
is
already
after the
taken into account.
35 cent. This
Yeah.
is after the 35% amount. So
Yeah,
if
if
your
you're-
home is worth $100,000, that's exactly what you're gonna pay.
correct.
But your $100,000 valuation, your home might have been worth $300,000, the valuation's, so it's already been taken out. That's the value of your house right there. That's the amount you're gonna pay right there.
Yeah,
No
so if
matter-
your house
no
is
matter.
valued at 100,000, it's $16 a month. If your house is valued at 200,000, it's $32 a month. So when I came up with $16 a month, I already took into account the 35%.
Yeah, that's already been done. That math's been done for you. We made that clear.
6
Yeah,
mills?
my point was that it's not your house, your market value, it's your tax valuation.
Yeah.
That's the point I was
Okay.
trying to make.
Yep, excellent.
6 mills. 6 mills will generate about $9.5 million per year annually to the school district. The monthly rate per $100,000 in valuation is $17.50. And the first time we would hit a negative cash balance would be June of 2026 of fiscal year 26. The deficit amount would be 800,000. And for the 6.5 mills, the tax generated would be about $10.3 million annually, and the monthly the monthly cost of the homeowner per $100,000 valuation would be about $19 per month. And the first time we would hit a negative cash balance would be in December of 2026 of fiscal year 2027 of $900,000. So the difference between the two of the 6 mills and the 6.5 mills is 6 months. And the same thing with the 5.5 to the 6 mills is 6 months as well. So from here on out, each millage amount essentially gets you six more months. 6.9 mills, it would generate about $11 million annually. The monthly rate would be about $20 a month per 100,000 valuation. And the first time we would hit a negative cash balance would be June of 2027 of 2.4 million, which is fiscal year 27. And then finally, the 7.5 mills, it'll generate about $12 million a year, 11.9. And the monthly rate per $100,000 valuation is $21.88 per month. And the first time we would hit a negative cash balance is December of 2027, which is fiscal year 28 of $900,000. So to summarize, they're all on one chart, so you have one view. As mentioned, the five mills and the 5.5 mills essentially get you to the same point, but significantly less. And then from the 5.5 mills on, each millage amount gets you 6 months further in the future. And to summarize, the monthly rate, a 5 mil levy is about $14.58 a month, 5.5 is $16 per month, 6 mils is $17.50, 6.5 is $19, 6.9 is $20, and 7.5 is $22. Any questions?
Nope.
So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Ryba, who'll go over the benefits and challenges for each scenario.
Good job, George.
So as we take a look at this in the financial component and how long or how much dollars we'll get for each millage rate, how long that will last, what it'll cost our homeowners, it's important to look at this holistically is what are the benefits and the challenges regarding each of those millage amounts. So as we take a look, we kind of lumped 5.0 mils and 5.5 mils together as one because they told a similar story when you looked at it for the future financial stability of the district. So as we go through these, we looked at the same three categories and asked the same three questions for each millage rate. What's going to be that monthly tax rate to our homeowners and our community? And what's the benefits of that tax rate and what's the challenges related to it? We looked at the financial stability of our school district moving forward and what is each millage rate going to provide in regards to that. And then finally, the future outlook. We don't want to look just short term. Because if we look just short term, it might be an easy answer to say, well, put a 5.0 mil levy on the ballot. It's the lowest tax rate. But we want to look long term and see what challenges may we have based on this if we have a lower levy like a 5.0 mil levy. And that's what the future outlook was all about. So as you can see, the benefit, and the only benefit that George and I believe is stated with a 5.0 or a 5.5 mil levy is simply the tax rate. It's the lowest tax rate of what was certified, what was approved for the board by the board to consider, and George has already gone through those tax rates per month per $100,000 valuation for each of those levies. In terms of financial stability and future outlook, in our opinion, we don't see benefits in either of those categories, but we do see challenges. We see that with a 5.0 or 5.5 mil levy, that gives us our shortest period of financial stability, that we'll be financially stable through the 2024-25 school year. And as we look at our current funds, get us through the 2022 school year. So this levy truly generates only enough revenue to get us a couple additional years on our financial stability moving forward. The other thing we looked at is our future outlook. Now remember, this is a limited levy that you're considering tonight. So that means in 5 years, this limited levy will be back up, and that's what that green box at the bottom says. We currently have one 5-year limited levy on the ballot. Are on the tax docket. It was approved in 2016. If the board would follow that same pattern, it would be on the ballot in 2021. If this levy passes, if the board votes to approve it and the levy passes in May of 19, it's projected to be on the ballot for renewal in November of 2023. What this would do is this would align going for that renewal in 2023. Look how far our financial stability is. It's only to 24-25. So in 23, we're not only going to have to consider a renewal, we're going to have to consider additional funds to have the district be financially stable moving forward. The concern from a future outlook period is when you look at new money and a renewal together, you increase your risk of both failing at the same time, which means you're jeopardizing not only future funding, but past funding, and that's why we put that as a challenge moving forward in terms of a long-term perspective.
You would actually have 2 levies fail. So you'd have how many dollars? I mean, how many? So if you're looking at a tax levy that's say 6, you're looking at
It's about
9,
9.5
but then you'd have
million.
the other levy coming up as well, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, you're talking about a massive amount of funding
Correct.
that would be
Jeopardized.
jeopardized.
So that's a concern that we wanted to share with the board for your consideration. So as we take a look at 6 mills, we looked at the rest of them individually. The benefit is, if we remember, we had a 7.9 mil levy on the November ballot. That was cost $23 per month per $100,000 valuation. So as you look at a 6 mil levy, it's $1,750. It is a decreased tax rate than what we proposed to the voters in November. But comparatively, obviously, it's a higher millage rate. It's a higher tax rate than when you look at the lowest of 5.0 or 5.5. So that is a challenge. Of what was approved, it's a little bit higher rate on a monthly basis to our homeowners. In terms of financial stability, this returns us to 2007 funding. We've basically lost $9 million in state and local tax revenue since 2007, our last new levy. A 6.0 mil levy generates a little over $9 million. So it basically addresses that reduction in tax collections and gets us back to those 2007 levels. The other thing, although George stated in his slides that in FY26 we are in a negative balance, it's in June, it's of $800,000. But what we believe strongly is by the proactive measures, our projections don't build in those phase 1 reductions as of yet. So when you look at phase one reductions, that $800,000 deficit, we see that we could proactively address that and be financially stable through the FY '26, which is the 25-26 school year. The future outlook, it provides the greatest length of financial stability at the lowest rate. So as George said, every millage rate, every half a mil gets us another 6 months. But as we look at all of those that get us another 6 months and how it equates to fiscal years, 6.0 mils is that spot where it's the lowest millage rate, it's the lowest tax rate to our homeowners, and it gets us the longest range of financial stability, and we would not be on the ballot for future funding at the same time as a renewal. So it would put us in an off cycle. If the 5-year limited is on November 2023, the district could wait longer than 2023 to go on the ballot for additional funds based on current projections.
Yep, each half mil gets us about 6 months.
Correct.
Each half mil generates another $800,000 in revenue and costs the taxpayers less, $1.46
Yes.
from what I calculated. So
Correct.
that's how the increments go up.
So looking at 6.5, similar idea in terms of the monthly tax rate. It is decreased from what was proposed in November, but we get to, at this point, over $225 per year per $100,000 of valuation. The average house in Strongsville, depending on which sites you look at, range from $170,000 to $190,000. So let's just use kind of easy math. So you're looking at over $400 to $450 for the average homeowner a year for a 6.5 mil levy. What this does, this generates more than that addressing that tax revenue cut of $9 million because it generates about $10.3 million. So it not only addresses that tax revenue loss, but it allows opportunity for funding for future growth, and it gives us a positive cash balance through FY '26. And as George kind of stated, as we take a look at what is the length of funding versus the tax rate, a higher tax rate, a higher cost to the property tax owners in Strongsville, and it only gets 6 more months of stability. And you have to ask yourself the question, is 6 more months of stability worth a higher millage rate, a higher tax rate for our community? Future outlook, it has that same benefit of it would not be on the same cycle as our renewals. Looking at a 6.9 mil levy, a similar theme in the future, or the monthly tax rate, less than the November 18 levy. But here, the average homeowner in Strongsville is going to pay $480-ish a month for the average home for the levy. Again, it funds for future growth, but it's important to note that the reevaluation has officially kicked in Strongsville that we talked so much about 6 months ago. So what that means is a 7.9 mil levy in November of 18, it's close to being equal to what a 6.9 mil levy in May of 19 would be because of the reevaluation. So the amount that we would generate from a 6.9 mil levy would be similar to what a 7.9 mil would have been in November. It has a positive cash balance, but again, it has that challenge of it only gets us 6 more months for a higher tax rate and a higher millage rate. We would not be on the ballot in terms of our future outlook. We'd not be on the ballot the same as a renewal. But as we look at, it's a similar levy to what we put on in terms of what it would generate in November. That levy lost by a wide margin, and we see that as a challenge as looking at a successful levy campaign moving forward in May, should the board approve that. Looking at 7.5, similar idea, lower tax rate than November, but higher in comparison. You're looking at over $500 for the average home in Strongsville. This does, 7.5 mils provides the greatest financial stability. It's the only levy amount that's going to get us financially stable through FY '27. As we said, though, as a challenge, is because of the reevaluation, this levy would actually, a 7.5 would generate more revenue, not similar, but more revenue than we originally asked for in November of 18. The future outlook, there's not a benefit to it because based on our projections, a 7.5 mil levy, it would put us on a same cycle as a renewal in the future, and we consider that to be a challenge. So again, we summarized, and board members, you have this chart in front of you, a summary of the benefits of the financial, or the monthly tax rate, as you could see. The financial stability, we've kind of highlighted that, of looking at funding for future growth versus addressing the deficits that we have from the tax revenue cuts. And then the future outlook is there as well. And then looking at the challenges that are there between being on the ballot with renewal issues, the amount of additional time it gets us for the cost that it would take for our homeowners, and then that monthly tax rate and the millage amount and what we're asking our community to provide to support our schools. So that concludes the section on the benefits, the challenges, as we look at each of these millage rates, beyond just the finances, but the practical application of what does it mean to our district moving forward. Any questions on this section?
Nope, nice job. Nice job laying it out.
All right, so George just was going to highlight a few things on looking at this in one sheet of a simulation in terms of our future funding. So George?
So as Mr. Rivo stated, I took the current 5-year forecast and simulated it out based on the estimated revenue that each levy would generate. And as we touched on during the other slides, a 5 mil levy will get us through 2025. Our first deficit will be in 2026. The 5.5 mils essentially will get us to the same spot, and 6.0 as well. But the deficit's slightly lower in 2026, where $800,000, we think that'd be manageable at that point to solve that deficit. So it does get us essentially to the same point as a 6.5 mil levy does, and the difference between the two would be 6 months. So it would get us through 2026, and we would hit a deficit in December of 2026 under 6.5 mils. So essentially the same place, same thing with the 6.9 and the 7.5 provides us that longer stability, but at the end, it's 6 months longer than the 6.9.
The one thing to note, though, when we talk about the 6 months, it's not only, to me, when I was going through the data, and I made some different charts that I thought would be helpful for me, just to summarize the thing in total. It's not just that we go into a deficit. It's the magnitude of the deficit that's critical, because they all seem to go deficit about the same time, but the magnitude is quite different. One's manageable through, we make timely decisions and cuts, and we look at what we have to do, and we work our cost structure on. Some of those are manageable even into that, certainly into that year, maybe even to the next year. But some of the levies amounts are so low that it's not manageable. When you go 4 or 5 negative in a single year, it's very difficult to do anything with that, right? So even though the timing of them is very similar, and when they all go negative, it's the magnitude of which they go negative that's the where we have to look at.
So, George, you need 13 mil sitting in an account for payroll, correct? What's your bottom figure that we need sitting in an account?
So our monthly spend is on average payroll, all expenses. We average about 6.5 million a month.
So
on
we
our
need
expenses.
13 mil sitting in an account, correct? For 60 days.
Correct.
So 5 mil ends on 2023, 5.5 at 2024, 6 mils 2024, but we still have a 9.1 reserve the year after, but essentially 2024. 6.5 at 2025, 6.9 at 2025, and 7.5 at 2026. Because we need to maintain 13 million sitting in an account to be able to pay everybody for 60 days.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Well, it might be between here.
No,
This is
and I agree. I'm using his data
Right.
and just circling where the critical components are, where the stop gaps are. I mean, I realize that at 6 mils, at 2024, we've got 16.9 million sitting in reserve, and it could be a few months after that. But in reality, that's our point of pressure at this point. We've spent down our cash reserves at one point, and not that between now and 2024, we're not gonna have additional reductions, enrollment's gonna be going down, we don't know what's gonna happen. But the reality is, I'm just taking your chart and saying, here's our critical components, here's our squeeze point.
Any other questions on the chart, or? So as we take a look at this and as we look at, the feedback that we got from the community, the discussions that we've had, the work that we've done, I think it's important that we take all that into consideration. We take into consideration that we need to make reductions as a district, as painful as those are, while protecting the core of what we're able to offer. We need to make reductions. And we're going to propose that of a tune of $1.1 million. And again, that's going to make that bottom line not look perfect, but look better. And it's going to be able to, as we look at some of these deficits and you look at the compounding effect of $1 million savings in FY 2020 and how that looks in 2024, it's going to compound. So we need to look at that. We need to hear the community's feedback that we have had declining enrollment, and I think we've demonstrated how that's not a one-to-one correspondence, but that we need to review our expenditures as a district, and we need to look at what levels of funding do we need that puts the least amount of tax burden on our community to provide the education our kids deserve and our community expects. And so as we look at that, we looked at those areas of what is that monthly rate? How can we get as far as we possibly can and give financial stability to the school district at the lowest tax rate possible to our community? And how can we also make a decision in 2018 that's not going to put the district in harm's way in 2023 based on aligning new money with renewal money? And as we take a look at all those benefits and all those challenges, George and I have spent a lot of hours of discussing this, and that's why we are recommending that the board consider a 6.0 mil levy on the May 2019 ballot, for just those reasons. As we take a look at what we truly believe could get us financially stable through the 25-26 school year. It's the lowest millage rate that can do that at that period. It doesn't put the district in harm's way into the future, and it gives us that financial stability and really addresses the deficit that we've had since 2007 based on cuts and reductions outside of our control. So at this time, Mr. Naso, George and I turn it back over to you to lead a discussion based on our recommendation that a 6.0 mil 5-year limited issue be put on the May 2019 ballot.
All right. Excellent. I mean, I appreciate all the work. I appreciate all the summaries, all the schedules, all the work you've done. I respect your recommendation of the treasurer and the superintendent. With that, we'll open it up. Does anybody want to start with,
I would.
okay.
I'm fortunate enough to have a father-in-law who was at one point back in the 80s on the school board. And he pulled a very interesting article for me. And he literally lectured me on this for about an hour when I went to pick up my kids. Ohio's property tax among the highest in the nation. We are ranked number 9 in the entire United States for property tax costs. So please, as you look up at this board, we've listened to you. We've heard that you don't want a continuous. We've heard that a 7.9 is just too much. But just to name the states ahead of us, New Jersey, Illinois, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Vermont, Texas, Nebraska, Connecticut, and Rhode Island's number 10. We get taxed. We get taxed a lot. We get taxed by Columbus for a whole bunch of things. So we've listened to you. That's why we're going through the situations we are going through today. But I also do want to mention that out of the 23 counties or 23 municipalities in Cuyahoga County, we're number 28 out of 31 in Cuyahoga County. Ranked in the state of Ohio.
That's the lowest. Highest to lowest. We're the 28th
Highest to
lowest.
lowest, yes. Ranked out of the state of Ohio, we're 137. So let that sink in. The only people that are worse or better than us, Kelly's Island, Middle Bass, and North Bass Island. They're ranked 610, 611, 612. We're 137 based on our school funding out of the entire state of Ohio. We provide amazing, amazing opportunities for our children. We provide extracurricular activities. We provide sports, orchestra, band, theater. And we also provide them an opportunity to get an education, so when they go into college, they're not the freshman. A lot of kids go in as a sophomore. So again, I'll read this back to you. We're number 137 for school funding in the state of Ohio, and we're number 28 out of 31 in Cuyahoga County. I think that is something to be applauded. I think that we've done a lot of reductions in costs. We've shed buildings, we've eliminated buildings, we've consolidated our buildings. I think it's important, as I mentioned.
So George, where do you have any questions on the millage? You want any comments on the millage amounts, or where you think you'd,
My comment regarding the millage rates, if we do the 1.1 reduction, so we, not starting in 2019, obviously it'd be 2020. We save $4 million a year, so that takes FY 2024 from 16.9 in the reserve to 20.9 in the reserve. Moving it to 2025, we would have a 9.1 in reserve. That would turn into a 13.1 in reserve. So that helps us stretch that space for the 6 mills. Just my opinion.
Duke?
I don't know any company, and I was in the corporate world for 21 years, I don't know any company that could exist now on the budget that it had in 2007 and have added the things that we've added for the schools in terms of technology and the opportunities for the kids in Strongsville to be competitive for their college or their careers coming out of our schools. We've said this before, that we're all very proud of our kids when they graduate because they are so well prepared. But that's in jeopardy now, as Cameron and George have so eloquently put it. It's in jeopardy that we would become a mediocre or less than mediocre school district because our community hasn't stepped up to the plate to put forth the funds necessary to keep those opportunities for our children. So I am inclined to go with the superintendent and treasurer's recommendation of 6 mills. I think it's a reasonable burden, and I'm a taxpayer too. I don't want to pay any more taxes. But in this case, like I said, no company that I know of has still working on the budget it had in 2007 and had any chance of really improving or staying the same as it was in 2007. So I think the 6 mills is the best trade-off, as Cameron outlined.
Jane?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a few points of clarification for people. When we talk about fiscal year, that's the year the students graduate, so it's not the start of the school year, it's the end of the school year. And then I wanted to clarify, our tax collection is also based on when we as taxpayers pay our taxes, which is why there's some variability there. So if you pay your taxes all at once, then we get a larger share at that time. It's not evenly distributed based on the taxes. And then I wanted to clarify what Duke was explaining about the valuation, because now I'm confused. It's, if your property market value is $200,000, which is what the median home value is in Strongsville as of 2016, that's the figure people should look at to determine what their monthly value is. They're not going to take a third of that and say it's $1,750. No, it's really only going to be $5. Is that correct? The $1,750 is what your market value is.
It's the, so you have, so for example, if you look at Zillow right now, it might tell you an amount that your house is worth.
Right.
But it's gonna be based on what the county has you valued on the county's books, and
Yeah.
we just went through the reevaluation.
Yes.
So it would be that amount, multiplied, here, I'll just do the math. It's essentially multiplied by 35% of that valuation.
So they've done the math, so this $1,750 already takes into account that reduction of what the taxable amount is.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I hope everyone is clear on that now. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you've got a market valuation,
Right,
then you've got a full tax valuation.
right,
And that full tax valuation is then what we're saying is the, if it's 200,000, it's gonna be twice the number that we put out. So there's no math that has to be done. from that,
Correct.
Right, so you've got a
Yes.
market valuation off of Zillow, or
Right.
your realtor might tell you, but you go to your tax document, you go to this county auditor, it's gonna list your property tax valuation. From there, if it says your house is worth 100,000, you're gonna pay $17, or,
Right. Okay.
whatever on the one rate. You're gonna pay on a 6 mil, you're gonna pay $17.50. If it says your house is worth, your valuation is $200,000, then you're gonna pay 2 times the
$17.50.
$17.50. That's all the
Okay.
math you have to do.
All right.
You have to do anything after that. We've already
Right.
incorporated that 35% calculation
Okay.
into our number, so you don't have to do that. Just have to look at your valuation, times, divide by 100. If it's 2.3 of that, if it's 1.5 of that, you multiply it times this number, that's what your increase will be.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a good point.
I
Jane.
just
Excellent.
wanted that to be
And Jane, my
clarified.
point was, it's not your market value.
Yeah, don't go to
It's
Zillow.
not your market
Right,
value.
right.
It's your tax
Yeah.
valuation.
Right, yeah,
Okay, so then, moving on.
yes.
The 1.1 million in proposed reductions that we are planning on implementing regardless in order to make all these numbers work, is there any plan to implement even more cost savings, or are we at status quo? And given this situation, then, we're not going to be able to ever offer any new or additional programming?
Correct. So the first question is, obviously, we'll always continue to look for possible cost reductions. We have looked at every single aspect of our organization. And so as we looked at those tiers or those phases of where we feel that those are appropriate, there may be a stone unturned, but I'd be hard pressed to find it. And what we could look at is, there could be ones from other phases that we bump up to say we need to save a little bit more money. We were hoping to not implement this one that's in phase 2, but we could bump it up to phase 1. So we feel we've got a pretty comprehensive list. In terms of those, it just depends on the timing. In terms of will this levy allow us to add new things? No, that's going to be challenging. And really what you're looking at this is, how can we continue to provide that premier educational experience for our kids? But if we're looking at adding, we're going to have to look at the same time of what are we going to reduce costs to make this work? Because as Duke stated before, we'll be operating on 2007 funding.
So the only way to add new programs would be to say a program was eliminated to replace it.
Correct. Here's other reductions that we can
To
make.
evolve, like, so the sewing machines in the schools are no longer, so we have computers now instead.
Yeah. But Jane, we will
The
continue.
makerspace.
We're gonna put the 1.1 in. We're gonna continue to do what we always do.
Right.
George is, and we all are, like things we did like last year where we decided to start buying just slightly larger buses so we could decrease the fleet. Or we looked and we added a gas line to which of the elementary schools?
Chapman.
Chapman, so that we could save on it. We're gonna continue, those types of
And we're
things
not
aren't
even
in the
sure what
plan.
those savings even are yet at this
Yeah.
point, if this is the first winter and the first
Well,
year,
they're-
but,
I mean, any of gas is definitely cheaper than
Yeah.
electric, so we're definitely gonna save money there, but, so yeah, we're gonna continue to turn over every stone and be diligent and continue to shake the trees and work with our community engagement on the finance committee, now the way we redesigned it. We've got people from the insurance industry, people from real estate side, people from, maintenance, all those types of people looking through our numbers to give us ideas. There are still there's more savings out there, and we're gonna continue to look for it. Though unfortunately, we've taken all of the low-hanging fruit, and a lot of the big items have already been taken, but you know what, if we could find $300 here, or $1,000 here, or $2,000 here, we're gonna continue to shake the trees for that stuff. And if we can find something big, we'll find it. So yes, to answer your question.
right. Well, based on the recommendation and my evaluation of everything we're able to offer, I think 6.0 is a reasonable ask as far as, it's not overstuffing our ballots of, or our boxes, our coffers of, and it enables us to continue to fund the programs that our students really enjoy. And my children were in orchestra as well, so.
Thank you, Jane. Richard?
So I want to thank George and Cameron for the analysis. The thing that I do want to discuss as a board, we're discussing the levy and we're discussing the dollar amounts and the benefits. Everything is under the guise of what would be wise and what buys us the most time, et cetera. But we're, in the analysis, as far as the pluses and minuses, they were on the merits of the dollar amounts. What we haven't discussed is what we think can pass. And what I want to confirm with George and Cameron is whatever millage passes, the phase 2 cuts would be pushed off.
Correct.
So regardless of what millage we're discussing, the phase 2 would be pushed off.
I'm not-
Phase
If
1.
If May, if
I'm
it
not sure of
passes in
that.
May.
I'm not sure that if we go with a lower millage, we may.
We're buying time.
We're buying time, but we may have to draw those second-tier cuts in before we go out for new money. We might have to start making those additional.
My point is we wouldn't have to consider making those phase 2 cuts for the next year. The proposal, as we're discussing it, the phase 2 cuts, if the levy fails in May, we're looking at phase 2 cuts for next school year.
That's correct.
Correct.
That's what I.
That's correct.
Yes.
And any millage amount that we're considering, we would have the ability to put off those phase 2 cuts for next school year.
For next school year, correct.
And we've discussed that a lot, that the millage amounts buy time. And the analysis was all based on if I had my druthers and I get this amount of money. But I don't think it considered enough that every mill, every half mill more will make it that much more difficult to pass. And, you know, I did the numbers, and I'm sure we all did. We're saying 5 mills is $14.58 per month per $100,000 valuation. But if our average, and Jane confirmed this for me, if our average valuation is $200,000 is a rough number, it's
194.
194, but that makes the math more difficult. If we use $200,000 as the average value, you're talking, for the 5 mil, you're talking $350 a year. The 5.5, you're talking $385 a year. It just keeps on going up. The 6 mil, the recommendation is $420 a year. If you are blessed as an individual taxpayer and can afford that, I'm sure everybody would want to pass as high as we can go. But if you're not blessed, the difference between 350 and 420, I want us to consider with the pragmatism of what will pass in May. I argue that lower is better from a pragmatic standpoint of what will pass in May. And if I'm talking to a taxpayer that makes a difference, I can earn that support. We've discussed that one of the consequences is, when do we run out of money? Regardless of what mill we approve, we have 2 fixed 5 years. We're going back to the taxpayer at the very least on that schedule. We then throw in the new governor and the new legislature, and we have Cupp-Patterson, and we have no idea how that's going to shake out. But if it doesn't shake out well for Strongsville, all of this planning, we're going to have to say the same thing we've said before: the state isn't funding us again. And so I'm not, and I understand from a management standpoint that you don't want to have to worry about that all the time. Every business wants to know that they're gonna be profitable, money's gonna come in, I can pay my employees, et cetera. I honestly think in Strongsville, we're going to be in this environment for long term, where it's, you know, it would be nice to say, we've gotten ourselves, and we don't have to worry about funding until 2028, 2020, whatever. I think it's gonna be a constant thing. The benefits of the 1.1 million cut benefit whatever millage we take. So if 5 mils is too low for the board, you know, I think 5.5 is better. Not from a management standpoint, from a what will pass, because we have to make up 12 percentage points by May. And that's the hesitation I have for 6 mils. What will position us to say, can we be successful? The board has been privy with the phase 2 cuts. The phase 1 cuts will be annoying, but the phase 1 cuts do not hurt or stick or become very difficult. The phase 2 cuts, those are all choices that none of us want to make. You know, we have talked about busing, phase 2 busing. They are all the really heavy hitters, because as Carl pointed out, we don't have many tools in the shed. What will position us to be successful in May and to continue to be humble with the taxpayer and come back? And yes, that renewal may not be simple. It may not be it's just a renewal, no new taxes. It may be, okay, we hope we've done well in the past 3 years. We want to earn your support. It's going to be a little more. But I think the taxpayer is indicating that they would rather be able to judge often than say, here's your amount, don't bother me for 10 years. I think the taxpayer, what they said last time was, it's okay if you come back to us and prove it every time. And it's a 2 to 3 year mix, but we're going to, no matter what, based on our options today, we're gonna have 2 5-year levies.
Yep.
And I would love to be able to forecast into the future. We earn enough trust that we can convert one of those to a continuing or what have you. But the taxpayer, the voting taxpayer, has said very clearly they want to have the district earn it each time. So I've said my piece.
Thank you.
I'd like to see what, if I've swayed anyone.
Okay, so I'll give it my 2 cents here. You know, I accept and support the 6.0 recommendation by the treasurer and the superintendent. I respect what Richard said, that the lower the number, the greater the likelihood it'll pass. I see that. I know that the difference between 5 and 6 is about $70 a year for the average taxpayer. To some, $70, no big deal. They go out to dinner. Other people, $70 is a big deal. It's the difference between paying your children's dues, his other fees on time. It's the difference between a lot of things. You know, it's cutting your prescription in half, whatever you have to do. I get it that it's money. And I get that some people, struggle. So we're here balancing, going as low as we possibly can to maintain the district that we have and other things. So, we listened to what the feedback and all that was weighed into all of our decisions. It certainly was weighed in mine. I talked to a lot of different people over the last couple of weeks. We listened to the focus groups. They said too much, too long, make cuts. And so we're going to implement $1.1 million worth of cuts. And those are negatively going to impact our students and our personnel. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. And we're going to make those cuts regardless of whether we have a May levy or not. We're going to make those cuts. they said too long, so we're gonna limit the term. So we're gonna go to a 5-year levy instead of a continuous levy. And as Richard pointed out, that's gonna give our voters 2 chances to grade us, 2 chances to weigh what's going on. So about every 2.5 years, they're gonna, they're gonna get the vote, and they're gonna say whether we're doing the right things or whether we're not, whether the right people are sitting in these chairs or not. And so we're gonna look at that. I think reducing to the 6.0 from where we were lessens the burden on our taxpayers by about $5.50 a month. So that's about the same number. That's like $60, $70 a year, from where we were. It'll mean that actually we're gonna have to, if you look at when we go negative, we have to shorten the year. It says we're gonna have to reevaluate or make additional cuts at a later time, sooner than, if the original levy wouldn't pass, but that's not what the taxpayers wanted. So, I think reducing to 6.0, still this gets us through the 25, 26 year, before we go negative on cash, and we're gonna make additional cuts, and we're not gonna go negative in 25, 26. We're gonna continue to work and make tax, and maximize savings and do those things. I believe we can make additional cuts in the future to prolong the deficit. But I think the problem with some of the lower millages is that it forces our hand too soon when we have to go for new money, because the deficit amount, like I said earlier, it's the magnitude of the deficit. When we go negative so big with the lower numbers that it forces our hand to go out for new money, as opposed to giving us a chance, a little bit of lead time, because this is a cumulative. Our cash balance is just like your savings account. It's a cumulative balance. If we can make $1 million, like Richard pointed out, or George, I believe it was, if you make $1 million cuts today, 4 years from now, you're gonna have $4 million in the bank, because these are annual savings. So that gives us time to continue to look for more things. The other thing too is that the 5 mil levy, if that's enacted over a 5-year term, we will deficit spend by $16 million over that period of time, in that 5 years. As you go a little bit further, that's when you go negative. If you do with the 6 mil, it's only $9 million. So it's a little more than half, but it's still that same rate that you do. So for me, it's all in the magnitude of it. So my personal belief, and the way I'm gonna vote, I believe that I believe at this level, we could still deliver our promise to provide an incredible education and opportunities for our students, still do our part to maintain stable home values for our community, and at the same time, to Richard's point, be sensitive to the burden to the taxpayers. And we can pledge to continue to make every effort to maximize every tax dollar. So with me, I hear what you're saying, Richard. I've already built that into my equation, the sensitivity of it. I understand the lower, the easier, but it also puts us in a very precarious situation 5 years from now, and I don't want to kick the can down the road. So for me, I'm still at the 6.0. I agree with the recommendation of the superintendent and the treasurer, and I think that's just, would anybody like to change their thoughts or, so at this point,
Mr. Naso?
yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the superintendent and treasurer and put a 6 mil levy on the ballot for May.
I'll second that.
This gives us time for more discussion. Richard, can you want to talk more through this? We have time to talk more through this. We have all the time in the world to talk.
I'm just looking at this 6.0 versus 5.5 with the negative cash balance. It's, like you said, it's 6 months. And to Richard's point, is it worth the gamble, if you want to say, to go for the higher amount and risk it not passing when all we've gained is potentially 6 months?
6 months, but it's $1 million. I mean, so it's a lot. I mean, it's bigger than what it looks.
But we're
to
gonna
me.
be making $1 million worth of cuts.
Yeah, that's why I like the
So
6, because it gets me into that next year. It gets me past 26, it gets me to the 26, 27 school year, which I think is critical. And it keeps us out of that pattern with the other levy, with the renewal cycle of it. So I think that's, I mean, that's,
And I understand I'm in the minority. I think 5.5 gets us to within, if I squint, is it 56,000, is that right?
Correct.
You know, that's 56,000, and it gets us to the end of 2025. And it is currently January of 2019, and that's 6 years. That's a lot of time.
Actually, Richard, it doesn't get you to the end of 2025. Because we need a $13 million balance sitting in the account.
But
At the end of 2025, you're at 4.8 plus 5, you're looking at 9.8.
months before that, we couldn't make payroll.
is Phase 1 included in those numbers?
It is not.
Phase 1 is not included in those numbers.
I just
So as
added,
George,
I just added 5 years to that amount.
you know, the thing we're trying to do is forecast, and the farther we forecast, the more comfortable we feel. 2025 is 2 biennium budgets.
Which have only gone against us every time. And
Correct.
And we'd anticipate
but-
going against us in the
But
future, right?
we anticipate that, but our forecast is based on it staying
Staying-
steady.
Right.
And so,
To me, that's just another risk, right, against what we're saying here. It could be sooner.
you know, at the end of the day, if we discuss it from a management standpoint, 6 makes sense, 6.5 makes sense. You can argue whatever level you want. But if you look at it from what will pass in May and how high stakes it is and how little time we have,
Yeah.
I think 5.5 is something to consider, because I think we can, with diligence, assuming the forecasts are correct, we can push it beyond that December 2025. And
So-
then we still have a renewal in place, and we'll have to consider all of those things and have these same conversations again. But it allows us to have 4 years of showing the taxpayer we mean what we say and we say what we mean.
I think we need those diligence, I think we need the 6.0 plus the cuts, plus the diligence, just to get us close to this, to the 6.0 projection of 2026. We're not gonna get there, without additional diligence. We're just,
you're not
there's gonna be, there's gonna be inflation, there's gonna be things that change, there's gonna be more, children going to Monarch, there's gonna be more unfunded mandates that come out of this district. They're already talking about increasing the charter school, waiver process to include parochial schools, and, there's all kinds of things that are gonna come our way that we're gonna have to offset. And I think there's just as many of these challenges that are gonna come our way that I think anything below 6.0 leaves us, naked and defenseless, with no ability to maintain the current level. We are not even gonna maintain the current level. We wanna provide an incredible education to these students, and I think we're gonna take a small step back, but I don't wanna go any further back, and I just think lower than 6 does that to us. And I get exactly what you're saying, I get what you're saying, Jane.
And at the end of the day, my concern again is failure.
Yep, I agree.
So let me just recap. If we keep it to a clean $1 million, not 1.1, just a clean $1 million. In 2025, at 5.5, you're gonna have $9.8 million sitting in the bank. Now, we can add another $500,000 to that, so you're at 10.3. Still does not give us the cap that we need.
But that's
To
a
be able to pay-
benchmark.
to be able to pay-
We're still able to make payroll without having, right? That's
It's
just,
a benchmark.
so it's, you're implying that if we don't have the 13 million, we can't make payroll, and that's not true.
But the cap that I was told was $13 million.
Right, that's our goal.
$6.5 million per month is what leaves this district.
Right.
So if we have 9.8, let's call it 10.3 at 2025 for 5.5 mils, or we have 14.1 million sitting in the bank for 6 mils. So are we able to pay our teachers, pay our support staff, pay our payroll for 2 months if we go 5.5 or 6?
Well, that would be
Mills.
assuming then we wouldn't have any renewal. Then we would be in jeopardy of not being able to make payroll.
But once we get to that cap, you know, because we only get paid a couple of times a year, right, 4 times a year, it would continue to go down, and then that's when we get in jeopardy. That's why we've always tried to keep that. I mean, in the past, we never had it. Now we've, through due diligence, through you know, the $8 million of cuts we made in you know, 2011, and you know, everything else we've done since then, that's gotten this balance up there. But I get what you're all saying. I mean, it just depends how you look at it, you know? And I'm still on the 6.
I have a couple of concerns, I guess, one concern, and that's the overlap that Cameron outlined with the 5 and the 5.5, because even if you stretch it out like Richard's talking about, and as you said, Carl, that depends, that everything else falls into place. There's no cushion whatsoever with 5 or 5.5. And the overlap between the renewal levy and the new, this one, levy would be a problem for going back to the taxpayer so soon. The second thing is that, you know, listening to Andy tonight and some of the other parents that we've heard come in here, I guess I hope this is the right fiscal thing to do for the district is the 6. That's the right fiscal thing to do. I understand Richard's point about trying to game it a little bit for the taxpayers and say, oh, we're selling you a lower rate. But I have more faith in maybe the people of Strongsville, especially the parents that have kids in the school, to help us to get this message across, to get the reasons why we think this is the right millage across. Even though it's more money, I think the parents and the people in Strongsville will do right by the kids. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I think they have done so in the past, and I think they will do so this time, especially now that the reevaluation values are known, and they know what their tax bills are gonna be, which they didn't know in November very well. So I still stick with the 6.
Duke, I just want to be clear, I'm not trying to game the system. I'm trying to respect the taxpayer, and I'm trying to say that we're trying to predict 5-6 years down the line, and I trust the taxpayer enough that if we have a good message and we do what we say, if we have to come back again, we can resonate. The previous plan in November was that idea of give us a large amount of money and we'll stretch it for 10 years. And I think the taxpayer was clear that that didn't resonate with them. I think the taxpayer was clear that they would prefer smaller and incremental.
Yeah. And I think we've done that. We've cut this in half. This is a 5-year. At 6.0, this essentially gets us 5 years before we have to come back. It also, you know, we're putting in some significant and painful cuts, although there's uglier ones coming. So we're just trying to work that out. Jane, are you still on? Are you still good with the 6?
And I'm thinking of being the homeowner and coming out of their pocket. It's a difference of $50 a year for the average person, and that, like you said, can be a huge game changer. That might be, can I buy my kids shoes? Can I do pay to participate? I mean, everything adds up. We all have choices. I just don't know if people want to pay for the kind of education that we're currently providing.
I know. And
Some
that's-
people see there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily must-haves in an education, and that's what I'm struggling with.
Right. Right. I guess we just have to figure it out, right? We got,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah,
we have a second. So we're gonna vote.
And to clarify, for this, for a millage amount to pass, it would need to be by 2/3 of board majority votes, so it'd be four votes. For it to
Okay.
pass, 4 yes votes. Ready?
Yep.
So this is for the 6 mill levy. Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
No.
Mr. Miko?
No.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Motion does not pass.
So what do we do?
I make a similar motion for 5.5 mils.
Second.
Any discussion? I'm thinking, so I'm discussing it within my own head.
So I think it's important for us to make a decision. George, when is our deadline? February 6th?
Wednesday, February 6th at 4 o'clock. It needs to be filed with the county.
Okay. Any discussion? George, take roll.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Colonel Evans?
No.
Mr. Grozan?
No.
Motion does not pass.
And I want everybody to understand exactly my reason. We save $1.1 million. At the end of 2025, we cannot pay payroll for 60 days. So the employees of this school district are penalized. The employees, the people who educate our children, who drive our children, who take care of our children in our buildings, don't get paid. That's it. That's why I said no.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
So if I may suggest, I don't think the board is gonna come to consensus tonight.
Absolutely not gonna come to
So,
consensus tonight. So
but
we're
I
going to-
will say out loud, every board member is voting his conscience, and every board member is approaching it from, important beliefs. Every board member wants the same thing, a successful district moving forward. I think the board needs time to think.
How much more time do we need to think? Okay, all right, so we're not going to vote on the remaining issues. We're going to schedule a special board meeting at some point in the very near future, and we're gonna discuss this. Everybody look at your calendars. Let's figure out when we can come back here.
George, what's the date again? February 6th.
February 6th at 6 o'clock, or at 4 o'clock.
No, we're gonna meet next week, either the 28th, the 29th, or the 30th. So what's the best date for everybody?
Unfortunately, I'm out of town.
Well, we only need 4, so we'll meet next week.
Richard, when do you return?
Friday.
Monday works best for me, the 4th.
Do you know how close that is to the date?
Yeah, next week.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
And just to add, if we do change a millage amount from what's already been,
We're not changing the mills, we could settle on one of these numbers. Right? Nobody's suggesting that we throw out another number, are they? We have like 6?
5.9.
No, we can't do that
We're
because
not
we
doing
can't
that.
certify it.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. It just goes back to the.
5.9.
So Monday the 4th, I guess. Everybody good with Monday the 4th?
What time?
6 o'clock? right here.
Mr. Naso,
Yes.
do you want to have a special meeting, or we have a work session later that week? Do you just want to move our work session date to that date and have one meeting that week? I leave it up to you.
Yes.
Move the work session?
We'll move the work session from the 7th to the 4th.
Okay. With a 6 PM start time?
With a 6 PM start.
Okay.
You know what, the 7th is Founder's Day, isn't it?
Correct. We
Yes.
were having an earlier
No,
meeting
we could just go
anyway.
there, then we can just go there after, because
We-
we'll, yeah, that's fine.
So work session moved to the 4th,
Yep.
6 PM start time.
Yep.
That's a better plan.
Yeah. We can actually just change that in the agenda later on today.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. That brings us to business services.
Business services, we have no items there. Curriculum, we have one item, the Strongsville High School Program of Studies is for your consideration for the 2019-20 school year be approved. Under student services, we have one item for our contract with Solutions Behavior Consulting. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that we enter into agreement with Solutions Behavior Consulting to provide consultation, direct BCBA therapy, and behavioral technician therapy to implement ABA services for an individual student commencing January 7th, 2019 per Exhibit K. And then we have Jenny with Human Resource Report for the month.
Under Human Resources, I have the following items for your consideration this evening. Under E1, I have appointments for certificated staff, appointments for non-certificated staff, appointments for certificated substitutes, appointments for non-certificated substitutes, appointments for certificated supplemental contracts, appointments for non-certificated supplemental contracts. Under E2, changes in hours for non-certificated staff. Under E3, changes in status for non-certificated staff. Under E4, continuing contract recommendations for non-certificated staff. Under E5, certificated medical leaves and non-certificated medical leaves. Under E6, one unpaid medical leave certificated staff. Under E7, volunteers for chaperones and mentors and volunteer coaches. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Item 10, Superintendents Report Technology.
We have no items under technology, Mr. Naso, so that concludes my report.
All right. That brings us to report on Polaris.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I will be brief.
Please.
The time for signing up for Polaris programs at the high school for next year is now. If you're interested, make sure to see your guidance counselors. And that concludes my report.
Legislation.
I'd like to congratulate Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted and Larry Obhoff, I have that right, was elected President of the House. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Jane, City Council.
Okay, there were 2 city council meetings. First of all, there will be a tax renewal levy on the May ballot for the city. It is it's a 1 mil levy that was originally passed in 1975. So it's renewed every 5 years, and it's for rubbish, police, and fire. And the city also asks that people are mindful of when the snow comes. If there's more than 2 inches of snow, there's a parking ban around the city, citywide. And so the police had to go knocking on doors to find the owners of cars so that they could be removed from the streets so that the plows could get through. So we ask that everyone be mindful of keeping cars off the streets during the winter for everybody's safety. And that concludes my city council
Thank you.
report.
You have any PTA or student achievement?
There was a PTA meeting, and one significance, they awarded over $6,000 worth of grants to various schools and teachers around the district, and we'll have a more comprehensive list of that at a future agenda. And also just to remind people that PTA and DARE work very closely together, and if everyone has a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, they are invited to volunteer for Safety Town, and that is taking place April 13th at the Rec Center. So applications can be found on the strongsville.org website under Police Safety Town. And next month is the Founder's Day celebration, which will be an evening meeting in which we honor volunteers throughout the district that have given to the children of Strongsville.
All right. Strongsville Education Foundation, I don't think there was a meeting.
There was.
Was there?
Mhm.
What happened?
It was a few weeks ago.
All right. It was-
No, they're working on the jockeys and juleps. We did talk to them about the efforts. You know, I did update the group on that we would be looking at some phase one reductions and some opportunities for them to possibly help support some of those reductions that may need to occur without talking specifics. So the jockeys and juleps, if you go on our website under For Community, there's the foundation page. The money comes back to support Makerspace, to support those field trips for our elementary and middle school students in certain grade levels. And it's the first Saturday in May, and it's a great event. And tickets are online throughout the month of January at a discounted rate, so you can get them before the prices go up a little bit in February.
All right. Finance Committee, there was no meeting. Policy Committee,
Go ahead.
We have third reading and to approve a bunch of new policies and changes to existing policies.
you can address that when we get to item 16.
I will.
All right. Facilities Committee,
Our next meeting is next Thursday, the 31st, and I'll be present.
all right. Business Advisory Committee has not convened yet. Okay, that brings us to consent calendar. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, George. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? George, take roll. All items with an asterisk will be approved in a single vote.
Mr. Grozan?
Yep.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'm gonna talk about the third reading. Richard, we're at that point.
You wanna do the motions first?
No, doesn't matter.
So
Sure.
moved.
Second. Good. Have a second?
No, I
That
thought
one.
you said second.
I can't make a second.
So the majority of the policies are updates to make sure we're in compliance with federal and state law. The two I wanted to highlight is our revised policy on credit cards. We have spent an inordinate amount of time to make sure we have controls and protections in place, and we do. So I think that's important for the public to know. Credit cards are only given when they're needed, and George has a bunch of reasonable controls and double checks in place to make sure that they're not abused. And if they are, we catch it, and our policy, we refer any criminal activity to law enforcement in addition to licensure for any appropriate employees. And then the other one is our new policy for school resource officers. We already have school resource officers, but it's important that we have it as part of our policy. The purpose of them is to have a safe, orderly, and secure learning environment, and it is a balance between law enforcement and the Strongsville Police Department and the school district. And so that is now a new policy for the district. Those are all my comments.
Okay. Any discussion? We have a vote?
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so that brings us to the first, there's another item, first reading of the new policy for part-time enrollment. We'll discuss that at a later date. It's the first reading. Board of Education, other, anybody have any others?
Yes, I do. Skip me for a moment.
Anybody? Bueller?
February 1st at Mashad's is the Strongsville Soccer Organization's Night at the Races. If anybody wishes to attend, it's a great organization for children. It's a great organization for soccer kids. So if you have the opportunity and you want to have a little bit of fun with some horse racing, please come. It starts at 6 o'clock at Mashad's.
Mr.
right.
Naso?
Yes.
I just want to make one last shout out for the Harlem Wizards that are coming on Thursday, January 31st, I believe. And we're really excited. We've sold a lot of tickets. They will be coming around to the schools on Thursday, visit all of our students, and to get them excited for the event. So again, our goal is just to provide an event for our community to come and have fun during this cold winter, to come out and enjoy and have a little fun together. So hope you can make it. Tickets are still on sale online and can be purchased at any of our buildings.
Excellent. I'd like to request that at one of a future board meeting, that our new athletic director, Denny Ziegler, come and make a little presentation on some of the changes. I talked to him at a couple of basketball games. He's got some great ideas and some great energy, and it'd be great to hear the things that he has going on.
Mr. Naso?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the soccer night at the races and you're wildly successful or wildly unsuccessful, February 6th, the Strongsville Athletic Boosters are also having a night at the races. So February 9th.
9th.
Thank you for the lifeline from the audience. I would be really in trouble if I got the date wrong. February 9th is the Athletic Boosters Night at the races, so either handicap well or double down and make your money back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Naso, I have one other comment. I wanted to send our condolences to the Hawk family. Charles Hawk just passed away. He was a lifelong resident of Strongsville. He graduated in 1955 and was two Letterman's athlete. He was Mr. Football. He was inducted into the Strongsville Athletic Hall of Fame in 1995. Just a formal council person, so his family is very entrenched in Strongsville, so our deepest condolences to their family.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Meeting notification. In the agenda, we'll be modifying the meeting notification to Monday, February 4th, at the Board of Education at 6 o'clock. And we have no need for executive session, correct?
Correct.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Duke and George, any discussion? Nope. George, take roll.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned at 8:47.